Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to do, or I'm going to present to you on APA for beginners. Okay, one thing which you need to know is APA is the type of writing style that NUST uses. Every university has a unique writing style, so NUST uses APA. So let's get into it. First thing is, what is citation? What is the definition of citation, right? So a citation is basically a reference to the source of information used in your research. As you must probably know, when you're doing your research, when you're doing your assignment, the knowledge which you are acquiring is not your own. You are going to acquire knowledge from another source. So basically, citation is acknowledging or giving reference to the source of information which you have used within your assignment. Now, anytime you quote, paraphrase, or summarize the essential elements of someone else's idea in your work, an in-text citation should follow. So basically, this statement means anytime you are quoting somebody, anytime you are summarizing information which is not your own, you need to acknowledge the source of where you got that information from in text. In text basically means in the body of your assignment. Okay. Third point is, you do not have to cite your own ideas unless you have published that specific work. This basically means is, if when you are in the process of writing your assignment, when you're in the process of writing your thesis and you have your own ideas which you wish to express, there's no need to cite your ideas unless these ideas which you are expressing has been published in the form of a book or a journal article. Okay, I hope this makes sense. Let's move on to the next slide. Why is citing so important? So why do we need to cite? Okay, there are 3 points which you need to remember. The first one is, it gives credit to the authors of the words or ideas that you have incorporated within your paper. So basically what you're doing is you give credit to wherever you got your information from. Okay, so let's say, for example, you are doing an assignment and you come across a book, right? You use information from this book which you have come across, but you do not give credit or you do not acknowledge the author of this specific book, for example. You need to do that because otherwise you'll be considering, or you'll be plagiarizing, which we'll discuss later. Okay. Point number 2, it also allows those who are reading your assignment or your work to locate those same sources which you have used in your assignment. So say, for example, somebody is in the same field of study as you are and they're very impressed with the author or the body of work which you have used within your assignment. By giving credit to this specific author, it allows the next person to locate the same source that they can use within their assignment as well. Okay, so that's point number 2. It allows those who are outside reading your work to locate those sources as well. And the last point is, citing your sources consistently and accurately helps you to avoid plagiarism, which is what I mentioned in the beginning. Okay, so you need to remember those 3 points. It gives proper credit to your authors. It helps people outside to locate the same sources which you used within your assignment. And the third one, it helps you avoid plagiarism, which is very important. Okay. Next slide. In the previous slide, we were discussing plagiarism. Okay. So what exactly is plagiarism? I think most of you have heard of the term copy and paste. So basically, plagiarism, to put it in short, is copying and pasting somebody else's work which is not yours and you have not acknowledged them. So the first point says that plagiarism is presenting somebody else's work or ideas as your own by incorporating it into your work without fully acknowledging them. Okay, which is basically copying and pasting, as we mentioned earlier. Point number 2, all published and unpublished material in whatever format it's in, whether it's in an electronic form, whether it's printed, whether it's in a manuscript form, is covered under this definition. Okay, so it does not matter in which form your information comes in. The fact that you did not acknowledge somebody else's work and presented it as your own is considered plagiarism. Okay, it doesn't matter in which form the information is presented in. Third point, plagiarism may be intentional, reckless, or unintentional. And the last point is you need to be very careful, because under NUST regulations, intentional or reckless plagiarism is considered as a disciplinary offense. So please be very consistent when it comes to citing whatever information you use within your assignment or your theses. I hope that's clear. Okay, the next slide. So what exactly is APA referencing? In the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned to you that APA is a particular writing style. Now, APA has is actually it means, or the term APA stands for the American Psychological Association, and basically it's a referencing system. Now, APA uses what they call an author date referencing system, which you will see as we continue with the presentation. Okay, point number 2 is there are 2 components in the APA referencing style. The first one is in-text citations, which is acknowledging your sources within the body of your assignment or within the body of your work, and their corresponding reference list entries. So whatever you have put in text within the body of your work, you need to give details of these citations at the end of your assignment within the reference list. Okay. The last point is, with anything that you have read, used, and referred to in your academic writing, number 1, you must acknowledge in text within the work, assignment, or the essay which you're writing, which I just mentioned. And alike, you should include the details of those authors which you have used within the reference list. So that is a list at the end of your work of all the sources you have referred to. Okay. Now, the previously NUST was using the APA 6th edition. However, now we have switched from the 6th edition to the 7th edition, and with this there have been small little changes. So for those of you who are familiar with the APA 6th edition, now that we've migrated to the 7th edition, which is the latest edition, there are small changes which have been included. So point number 2, the rules within the 7th edition now apply and must be used. So please don't use the 6th edition rules, but please now continue with the 7th edition. So certain changes which you can which are quite significant is the use of multiple authors, number 1. So in-text citations for 3 or more authors should include the name of the first author only, followed by et al. Okay. Reference list entries for works by up to and including 20 authors should include all the authors' names. For works more than 20 authors, include the names of the first 19 authors, followed by the ellipsis and the final author's name. This seems like a mouthful, but then as we go on with the presentation on citing authors in text, it will make more sense, and it will actually make more sense to those who are familiar with the APA 6th edition. So don't get too confused about this. Okay. Point number 2, place of publication is no longer included in your reference list. And number 3, the DOIs are now given in the following format, which is now this https doi.org followed by the number. The next point, is that it is not necessary to include the words retrieved from before a URL, which usually used to appear in the reference list. The database names and URLs for items in academic research databases should not be included in the references. And the last point, for electronic works that do not have a DOI or directly linking URL, the reference should be the same as a reference for a printed version of the work. Right, so like I said, this seems like a mouthful, but don't get too confused. Everything will be clear as we continue with the presentation. All right. Now we are going to start with in-text citation, right? Previously, I spoke about citing or acknowledging your authors within the body of your work. This is referred to in-text citation. So the first point states that include an in-text citation when you refer to or summarize a quote from another source. For every in-text citation in your paper, there must be a corresponding entry in your reference list. I think we spoke about that before. So please just remember to keep track of all the sources you have used in your assignment. So for any author or for any body of work you have included in your body of your assignment, you need to give the details of this author or this body of work within your reference list. Okay. Point number 2, APA in-text citation uses the author's surname and followed by the year of publication. So in this example that's given, it will look like this. If you have to summarize a paragraph written by Field, for example, you would include his surname, which is Field, followed by the year of publication in brackets. Now please note, between his surname and the year of publication, there is a comma in between. However, when you are quoting Field, I think you guys all understand what we mean by quoting. When we use word by word what Field has said, at the end of the summary, or at the end of the quote, you would include Field's name together with the page number. So you would open the brackets, put the surname, which is Field, comma, 2005, which is the publication date, and then include the page number, which is also separated by a comma. So you put comma, P, which represents the page, dot 14, which is a page number, and then you would close the bracket and end it off with a full stop. Just please note, with these two examples, it represents when you have not used the surname of the author within the summary. Okay, it looks a bit confusing, guys, but then things will be clear a bit later. So look at the example at the example below. A few researchers in linguistics field have developed training programs designed to improve native speakers' ability to understand accented speech. Now, can you see that this particular student has acknowledged their sources by putting the authors' names in brackets? Now, in this particular example, this particular student has used 2 different authors, but has included all of them within a bracket at the end of the paragraph. Okay? Their training techniques are based on the research described above, indicating that comprehension improves with exposure to non-native speech. And then can you see at the end, Okay, so now we are going to see, or I'm going to show you how you would cite in text. Okay, so once again, what does in-text citation mean? In-text citation means acknowledging sources which you have used within your assignment within the body of your work. Okay, so point 1, include an in-text citation when you refer to, summarize, or paraphrase or quote from another source. Okay, for every in-text citation in your paper, there must always be a corresponding entry within your reference list. Basically means that for every source you have used within your assignment, you need to provide the details of that specific source within your reference list. Okay, and those details I will show you how you would structure them. Right? The next point, as mentioned earlier, we said that APA in-text citation style uses the author's surname or the author's last name, corresponding with the year of publication of that specific item. So you can see in this example that follows, Field in this case would be the surname or the last name of the author of the body of the work, and 2005 is the year of publication when that specific source of information was published. Okay, now one thing which you need to remember that you put the details of the surname of an author followed by the publication details in brackets once you have summarized whatever it is you want to summarize from what that author has written at the end of the paragraph. So, and then it's followed by a full stop, but I'll give you more details in the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned before, there are certain examples on how you can cite or how you can reference in text. Okay, so when you have an item with that has an author, so this would be a book or a journal article that has an author's name, you would include, like we said, the surname of the author followed by the year of publication. So let's see the example that is given here. This specific examples, like you can see, they are discussing social media, and mind you, we have summarized what the author has said and we have used our own words. Never use the same words that an author has stated in their in the original source of information unless you are quoting. Okay, so this following example is we have summarized what Asmelash has said. So it goes as follows: heavy social media use can be linked to depression and other mental disorders in teens. Now we have summarized what this specific author has said. How do we cite him or her? So what we do is we open up a bracket, we write down the surname of this author, which in this case is Asmelash. So we write Asmelash, and then it's followed, his surname or her surname is followed by a comma, and we include the publication date, which in this case was 2019. Once we have done that, we close it off with another bracket, and then it's followed by a full stop. Okay, one thing which you need to note is always put a full stop at the end of the bracket, not at the end of the sentence that you have summarized, because the citation is part of your summary, if that makes sense. Okay, now in some cases you may find that there's an organizational author, right? There's no specific author, but there's an organizational author. So in this case, where you have a source of information, it could be in the form of maybe a leaflet or maybe an item on a website, but it has been written by an organizational author. How would you cite that? So let's see in the example which we have given. Mind you, we have summarized the information and we are using our own words. Okay, so it says that more than 300 million people worldwide are affected by depression. Now, how do we cite this organizational author? Because there's no specific name. In this case, this information was written by the World Health Organization. Okay, so you would open your bracket, you would write World Health Organization followed by a comma and the year of publication, which was 2018 in this case. You close the bracket and put a full stop at the end. Remember what I mentioned to you before. When you are summarizing, or when you have summarized what somebody else has said and you're going to cite them, make sure you put a full stop at the end of the citation, not at the end of the sentence which you have summarized. Okay, now in some cases you have an item or an information source with no date. Okay, how would you go about citing this? You would summarize what has been said. So in this case, in the example that is stated here, you would write establishing regular routines. Mind you, we're using our own words, right? Establishing regular routines such as exercise can help survivors of disasters recover from trauma. Now in this particular case, we know who has written it. In this case, it was an organization, like you can see, but there's no date that is stated. So you would open the brackets and indicate that it was this information was written by the American Psychological Association. Now in this case, where you can see that it's an acronym, you need to put them in square brackets. So in this case, it was APA. Close the square brackets, separated by a comma, and instead of indicating a date, you put the two letters ND followed by a full stop at the end of each letter. So N full stop, D full stop, close the bracket. ND basically means no date. then you would put a full stop at the end of the bracket. Okay, seems a bit complicated, but it's quite easy at the end of the day. Now, in some cases where you have an in-text citation but you've got different author variations, okay, this means that you have maybe used the work that has been written by two different authors, for example, okay, or you have work that has been written by one piece of work but has been written by two authors, right? So in this particular example, point number 1, it says authors' names in brackets when they are not part of the narrative. This basically means that when you are citing authors' names but their names are not part of your summary, okay, just like in the previous example, but in this case the only difference is it's been written by two authors. So the following example goes like this. Once again, we are using our own words and we are summarizing. One study found that the most important element in comprehending non-native speech is familiarity with the topic. We open the bracket and now you can see that we've got two different names. Gass is the surname of the first author and Varonis is the surname of the second author. So how do we separate these two surnames? We used an ampersand sign, okay, followed by a comma, and 1984 is the year of publication. We close the bracket and it's followed by a full stop. Okay, so you can see in this example there are two authors that are responsible for one body of work, and the two names are represented by an ampersand sign. In the next example here, it says authors' names are part of the narrative. That basically means when the authors' names are part of our summary. There are different ways in which you can structure and write your summaries. So this also shows you how you can go about it. So say, for example, you want to cite an author, but by including the author's names as part of your summary. You would in this case put Gass and Varonis, and can you see that instead of using an ampersand sign, we're using the word and please note that Gass and Varonis names are not in brackets, okay? Only the year of publication is in brackets. The reason being that Gass and Varonis names are part of our summary. It's part of our narrative. So Gass and Varonis, then we open the bracket 1984, we close the bracket, found that the most important element in comprehending non-native speech is familiarity with the topic, and then we put a full stop at the end of our sentence. Okay, so these are the rules of APA when citing authors' names that are part of the narrative and that are not part of the narrative. Okay, in some instances you may find that you use more than one information source, but you have summarized all the ideas within one summary. So in the next example, it says how multiple works, which represents multiple authors. Okay, now we have summarized what these authors have said. Mind you, we have not used our own words. Research shows that listening to a particular accent improves comprehension of accented speech in general. Okay, so we would open our brackets and indicate that Gass and Varonis, remember we put the ampersand sign, comma, 1984, which represents the year of publication. Now we are including two other authors that we have used. Okay, then we use the semicolon sign to separate the other authors' names from the first. Kretsch, ampersand sign, Thomas, followed by a comma. 2004 is the year of publication. We close the bracket and put a full stop. So between the two different authors, okay, we use an ampersand sign, right? And then we close the bracket. We end it off with a full stop. Okay. So be very, very wary that when you are summarizing something but you have used two different information sources to separate the author's details with a semicolon sign. Okay. Now in the next example we have what they call a direct quote. Sometimes you may feel that when you are doing your assignment, you feel that you cannot express it in your own words, and the best would be to quote what an author has said. Usually this example is used when you want to give a definition of something, or when you want to quote maybe a speech that somebody has written. Okay, so in such a case, when you have a direct quote, you add quotation marks and page numbers, okay, which is very important. So let's see in the next example that follows. One study found that, now we are opening our quotation marks because we are writing word for word what the authors have said. The listener's familiarity with the topic of discourse greatly facilitates the interpretation of the entire message. Once we have quoted what the author has said, we close the quotation marks and then we cite the author afterwards. So we would cite the author like we would do normally. We would open the quotation mark. In this case, the quote was taken by two authors which are responsible for one body of work. So it's gas, ampersand sign, Veronis. Now please remember that we are using an ampersand sign because the authors' names are not part of our narrative. Okay, so gas, ampersand sign, Veronis, comma, the year of publication, which is 1984, and what we are including now is the page number because we have quoted. So comma, P dot, which represents page, and which is this quote was taken from page 85. Close the bracket and put a full stop at the end. Okay, so you've noticed that whenever you are quoting, always include the page number, right? Now in the next example, where we have decided to use the author's names as part of our summary or part of our narrative, remember we separate the two authors' names with the word and. That's if you've got more than one author. Okay, so it's Gas and Veronis, 1984 is the year of publication, which is put in brackets. Found that, and then you open the quotation marks, you quote what the authors have said, which in this case is, the listener's familiarity with the topic of discourse greatly facilitates the interpretation of the entire message. We close the quotation marks and then we open the brackets again and put the page number at the end. So in this case, this quote was taken from page 85. We put P, which represents the page number, 85. We close the bracket and put the full stop at the end. Okay, the only difference between the first example and the second is we have included the author's names as part of the narrative, which is followed by the quotation, which is followed by the year of publication, and then we quote what they have said. After the quote, we include the page number at the end of the summary, followed by a full stop at the end. Okay, so it's very important that APA rule states that whenever you are quoting what an author has stated, it's followed by a page number. Okay, now we have what we call block quotes. That is referred for direct quotations of more than 40 words. Okay, so for direct quotations of more than 40 words, display the quote as an indented block of text without quotation marks and include the author's names, year, and page number in brackets or parentheses at the end of the quote. So say for example you have a long quote that is more than 40 words. You will not put quotation marks, but instead indent it in and then represent it as a block. That makes sense. So you would, for example, in the next example that follows, we are quoting what Gas and Veronis have said. They have stated that this suggests that familiarity with non-native speech in general, although it is clearly not as important a variable as the topic familiarity, may indeed have some effect. That is, and then we finish whatever it is that they have stated. Then we open the quotation, we open brackets, Gas, ampersand sign, Veronis, comma, 1984, which is a year of publication, comma, P, which represents a page number, dot, 77 is a page number, close the brackets. So this is a quote for more than 40 words. But please note, don't make it a habit to quote throughout your assignment. Okay? Only quote when it's absolutely necessary. Like I said, when you're quoting, for example, a poem, which a poem, for example, is that somebody has written, or you want to give a definition which a specific author has expressed in their body of work. Okay? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the part of the presentation that discusses in-text citation of multiple authors. Okay, you need to note that APA style has specific rules for citing works by more than one or multiple authors. So these are the following guidelines that you have to use to determine how to correctly cite works by more than one or multiple authors in text. Okay, so please note that when using multiple authors' names as part of your narrative, or when using multiple authors' surnames as part of your narrative or part of your summary, rather than in brackets, always spell out the word and. I think I've highlighted that to you already. Always use the word and for multiple authors' surnames, within brackets, use the ampersand sign. In the previous examples, I showed you that when you have one author, you would cite or you would reference him or her within brackets, just state his surname, comma, followed by the publication date. When you have two authors' names, you separate the names with an ampersand sign when their names are not part of your summary or the narrative, separated by a comma and the publication date. In a situation where you have a book or an item that has been written by 3 or more authors, instead of writing all of their surnames, you use the term et al. So what you would do is you would state the surname of the first mentioned author, followed by the term et al, which is ETAL, followed by a full stop, then a comma together with the publication date and in brackets. Okay, I hope this is clear. Okay, let's go to the next slide for further details. Now, when you come to the reference page, which is the very last page at the end of your paper, each source or each author that you cited in text within your paper must appear in your reference list. Likewise, that each entry in the reference list must be cited in text, right? Now, you need to note that the reference list should appear on a separate page at the very end of your assignment. Next point, the list should be labeled references in bold, and it should be centered in your page. The list must also be double spaced. Okay? The list must be arranged alphabetically according to the author's surname. Please don't put numbers like 1, 2, 3, and 4. The list must be arranged alphabetically according to the author's surname, right? And each reference should be indented after the first line, which is a hanging indent. So this is basically how your reference list would look like. As you can see, they're all alphabetically arranged, okay? And as you can see from the first reference, the lines that follow should be indented in, okay? So this is an example of how your reference list should look like. Please note that the term references is put bold and it's in the center of the page. Okay, so how would you put a reference list entry for one author, for a single author? So you'd put his surname first or his last name first, followed by the author's initials. So as you can see in the example here, we have put the author's surname, which is in this case Brown. You would put a comma followed by his or her initials, which is E in this case, and the publication date, which would be in brackets. You end it off with a full stop, and then you put the title of the work in italics, okay, followed by a full stop, and then the publication details or the publisher, which is Pickering and Chatto in this case. This is for a single author. How would you reference, for example, now 2 authors? Okay, so you list the surnames and the you would list their last names or surnames and initials. Now what you need to do, or what you need to note, you need to separate the author surnames with a comma. Okay, separate the author names or surnames with a comma, and you use the ampersand sign instead of and. So in this case you would have the surname, which is Soto, comma, his or her initials, which is C dot J dot, followed by a comma. Sorry, let me correct myself. You list the author's names and initials by a comma. Okay, so Soto, comma, C, which is his initial, full stop, J, full stop. That is now one name of a particular author. You separate it with a comma, an ampersand sign, followed by John, which is the surname of the next author, comma, O dot P dot, which is his or her initials, and then the publication date in brackets, followed by a full stop. So this would be an entry for two authors. Okay, therefore you would you would write the title of the article. In this case it's a journal article, followed by a full stop, and then the journal title would be an ampersand sign, followed by the details of the journal entry. Okay, now for instance, when you have a reference list entry for 3 to 20 authors, you would list by the last names or surnames and initials. Commas separate authors' names, while the last author name is preceded again by an ampersand sign. Okay, in a situation where you have an information source that is written by more than 20 authors, after listing the first 19 authors' names, you use an ellipsis in place of the remaining author names. Then end the final author's name. Please note, do not replace the ampersand sign before it. Do not place an ampersand sign before it, and there should be no more than 20 names in a citation in total. So you can see in the following example, we don't have 20 authors' names, but if you have more than 20 authors' names, you first list all 19, the surname, followed by their initials, followed by a comma separating the names, and then when you come at the end, you put an ellipsis, which is the 3 dots, okay, as you can see in the example below. Then you end the final author's name, but please don't put an ampersand sign between the ellipsis and the final author's name, followed by the publication date in brackets and a full stop. Okay, you should also be aware that there should be not more than 20 names in a citation in total. Now, in certain situations, you have what they call a group author. So group authors can include corporations, government agencies, or organizations, just to mention a few. So you treat the publishing organization the same way you would treat an author's name, and format the rest of the citation as normal. So also be sure to give the full name of the author group in your reference list, although abbreviations may be used in text. Okay, in this case, the following example, we're using one of a dictionary. Just please note, a dictionary does not have a specific author. So in this case, Merriam-Webster is the name of the dictionary, and we treat it as a group author. Okay. In a situation where you have an unknown author, when the work does not have an author, move the title of the work to the beginning of the reference and follow with the date of publication. Okay, only use the word anonymous if the author is the work is signed in as anonymous. So sometimes in a particular information source, it will actually indicate anonymous, and that's what you can use. Okay, only if indicated anonymous in the original author's work. So in a situation where you have 2 or more authors by the same author, sometimes you may have the same author, but he or she has written different books, okay, or the same book but with earlier editions. So you would use the author's name for all entries and list the entries by the year. The earliest is the one coming first. Then you would list the references with no dates before references with dates. So let's say, for example, one particular author has written 3 different books, like in the example listed below. However, the specific author in one of those 3 books did not have a publication date. Include the first entry that does not have a date first, followed by the other two books. But always begin an entry written by one author. Sorry, or is if you have a situation whereby you have one author that has written more than 3 books or 4 books. Blunder. Okay, if you have a reference list entry with 2 or more works by the same author, use the author's name for all entries or the author's surname for all entries and list the entries by the year, with the earliest coming first. In a situation whereby this specific author does not have a date, or this particular information work of this author does not have a date, you list the references with no date before the references with dates. Okay. If you have a reference list entry with 2 or more works by the same author in the same year, this is how you would go about putting a reference list entry for such a case. If 2 works have the same publication date, organize them in the reference list alphabetically by the title of the article or chapter. Then assign letter suffixes to the year. Refer to these sources in your essay as they appear in your reference list. For example, in text entry would look like this: Bernd, open the bracket, 2004A, close the bracket, make similar claims, and then you continue what you'd summarize what Bernd has said. And in the reference list entry, you can see that Bernd with 2004A represents the first entry and 2000B represents the second entry. As you can see, it's organized alphabetically according to the title of the article, which would be the first entry started with C, so it came first because it's children's friendships, and friendship would be next because F comes after C. In a situation where you have a reference list entry for an article in a periodical is could be a journal article, for example, or a magazine entry. The first example indicates an article in a print journal. So you'd put the surname of the author, comma, his or her initial, full stop, the year of publication in brackets, full stop, the title of the article in normal sentence case, full stop, and then the journal, the title of the journal should appear in italics, comma, followed by the volume number, the issue number, comma, and then the pages, followed by a full stop. If you have an article in an electronic journal, you would indicate everything just as the above. However, if you have the DOI number, you would put the URL of the DOI number at the bottom. If you have a reference list entry for an article within for articles in a periodical, for example, in this case a magazine, the only difference is you would enter the month of the when the article was published after the publication, the year of publication, just as indicated in the example below. Okay. In an example where you have a review, on the other hand, you would indicate that it's a review, and you would put this in square brackets just after the title of the article. So the basic format of a reference list entry for a book would look as follows. You'd put the author's name followed by the year of publication, the title of the work, a capital letter also if it has a subtitle, followed by the publisher name, full stop, and a DOI number if that specific book has a DOI number. If it doesn't, then you can just omit it. For a reference list entry of a book that is edited but does not have an author, you would indicate the credentials of the editors. So you'd put the editor's details followed by his or her initials, and then you would represent that in brackets by the term ED, capital E, small d, followed by a small full stop in brackets, which represents that this is an editor. If it's more than one editor, you would put the term EDS followed by a full stop and close the brackets, and then you would indicate the year of publication as normal in brackets, followed by the title of the book in italics, and then the name of the publisher followed by a full stop. In an edited book with an author or authors, you would put the details of the author first, followed by the title of the book in italics. If it has a subtitle, the capital letter would follow after the colon of the title of the work, and then indicate the details of the editor in brackets. Okay, close the brackets, full stop, the publisher, full stop, and a DOI if provided. Now, if you have a reference list entry for a dissertation or other printed sources, this is how you would go about putting it within your reference list. You'd put the surname of the author, comma, followed by his or her initials with a full stop after it, the year, the publication year in brackets, full stop, the title of the dissertation or a thesis in italics. If it has a publication number, do include that after the title of the thesis in brackets, and indicate what sort of thesis it is. This should always be indicated in square brackets. So if it's a doctoral thesis, you open the square brackets, indicate doctoral thesis, comma, and the name of the institution or university that awarded the degree. So for example, if it's from NUST, you would open the square brackets, doctoral dissertation, comma, NUST. But in this example, we indicate that it comes from Purdue University. Close the square brackets, full stop, and indicate the database or the archive name where you retrieved this dissertation from. In this case, the following example, this particular thesis or doctoral dissertation was retrieved from the ProQuest Dissertations Publishing database, followed by a full stop. Now, a reference list entry for electronic resources or online content. You would go about including these details in the reference list as follows. So if it's a web page or piece of online content, put the surname of the author followed by their initials like usual. You open the brackets, you put the year of publication, comma, indicate the month as well as the date. In most cases, when you retrieve items online, it usually indicates the date that it was put on. Close the brackets, end it off with a full stop, enter the title of the article or the title of the piece of information which was put online in italics, followed by a full stop, as well as the name of the site, followed by a full stop, and the URL where you retrieved it from. Okay, so if you have another reference list entry for an article which is an online periodical with a assigned DOI number, first things first, the surname of the author, his or her initials, the year, which is in brackets, the year of publication in brackets, followed by a full stop, the title of the article, which is in normal sentence case, the title of the periodical, which is in italics, followed by the issue number, the volume number, issue number in brackets, comma, the page numbers of that follow the article. In this case, a specific article called Development and Validation of the Active Empathetic Listening Scale. Covered pages was covered from page 161 to 180, followed by a full stop and the DOI. Now, if you retrieve an article online with no assigned DOI number, there's no need to indicate it. So if an online scholarly journal article has no DOI and is published on a website, include the URL. If an online scholarly article has no DOI and is published on a database, do not include a URL or any database information. So you can see in the example below that represents this. Now, if you have a reference list entry for other electronic sources such as an online news article, if the source does not come from a site with an associated newspaper, for example, leave the title of the article unformatted but italicize the title of the newspaper. Okay, so in this particular case, there was an article written by Richard C. full stop, open the brackets, the year of publication, comma, the month followed by the date, comma, full stop, and then the title of the article that was written by Richards, then followed by the URL of where this was retrieved. However, if the source doesn't come from a website with an associated newspaper, italicize the title of the article but leave the name of the site unformatted. You can see this in the example below. The title of the article is in italics, which is why flats dominate Spain's housing market, and the name of the site, which is unformatted, as you can see. We already came across this. If you have an electronic site, if you have an electronic source which is in the form of a dissertation or thesis from a database, you would include after you've done the surname, his initials, the year, the title of the dissertation or thesis in italics, followed by the publication number. Put the doctoral dissertation or master's thesis, whatever is the name of the awarding degree, the name of the institution or university awarding the degree. You close the square brackets followed by the database name. In this case, we indicate that this was retrieved from the ProQuest Dissertations and Thesis Global database in the example that's given below. Now, you also have to note that an email is also an information source. So how would you cite an email? Emails are not included in the list of references, although you should parenthetically cite them in your main text. So please note that if you have an email and you've included it in the body of your text, there's no need to put it as a reference list entry. So the following example below indicates how you would cite or how you would reference an email communication in text. So once you have an email communication in text, there's no need, it's not necessary for you to provide the details within the reference list. So the following example below was a personal communication or an email that was cited in text. So you would open the brackets, put the initial followed by his or her surname, comma, and then just indicate personal communication. So with any form of email, always indicate personal communication, comma, the date, which was January 4, comma, and the year. Close the bracket and put a full stop. Please note the difference between this and other in-text citations is that we put the initial of his first name with a dot followed by his surname, not like normal other citations, in-text citations, where you just indicate the surname. How would a reference list entry look for a YouTube or another streaming video? In this case, you just put the last name or the surname of the author followed by his or her initials. Now what you would do is you would put the username of the author, if available, in square brackets, okay, followed by a full stop. You would open the brackets, put the year followed by the month and date, close the brackets, put a full stop, and then the title of the video in italics. Indicate the format in which it comes, which would be a video in this case, and put that in square brackets, full stop, and indicate the streaming service. In this case it was YouTube, full stop, and then the full URL at the bottom. If you are trying to provide a reference list entry for a film, you put the surname and the name of the author, or in this case the director, and then in brackets you would put director, full stop, the year of publication in brackets, full stop, the title of the motion picture, which was Mamma Mia in this case, and then indicate that it's a film in square brackets, full stop, followed by the film production company, which is Universal Pictures in this case, followed by a full stop. If you have a reference list entry for audiovisual material, in this case it's a TV series episode, you would put the surname followed by a comma and the initial of the writer or director. Then open the brackets, indicate if it's a writer or director. In this case it was a writer and director for the example given. Close the bracket, full stop, put the year of publication or the year in which it was aired, the original air date, which has the month as well as the date, the title of the episode, the season number, the episode number in brackets. In the square brackets you'd indicate what sort of format it was in. Was it a TV series episode, which was in this case TV series episode in square brackets, full stop, and then followed by the executive producer details and the series title and the production company. If you have an artwork in a museum or a museum website, you'd put the name of the artist, surname, initial, the year of the release of that particular artwork in brackets, the title of the artwork, and the medium should be in square brackets, whether it's a painting or a sculpture, put it in square brackets, full stop, the name of the museum, the city, comma, the state, comma, the country, followed by a full stop, and the URL of the museum where this artwork, where you retrieved it from. If you have a photograph, for instance, you would put the photographer's details as follows, or sorry, the details of the photograph as follows: the photographer's name, surname, his initial, full stop, the year in brackets, or the year of publication in brackets, a full stop, the title of the photograph in square brackets, the medium, which was a photograph in this case, in square brackets, as well as the source and the URL where you retrieved this photograph from. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to an end of the presentation.